podcast time. It's podcast time. What's up, guys? Welcome to episode number 62 of GirlStreamers. GirlStreamers is a podcast bringing you the girl streamers that you know and love. GirlStreamers is a community that supports and promotes girls that stream. We are a bi-weekly podcast and we'll be introducing you to some amazing girl gamers and allow you, the viewer, to get to know some of your favorite streamers. My name is Nymphadora, and tonight I have Kinkednitemare joining me, and this is actually going to be a very special podcast. We are discussing why marginalized communities like girl streamers need to exist. This is a live podcast, so we do have questions, if questionnaire that you can actually send in your questions, and we will address them today. But remember, we will also be available for download on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube. So, what's up, Kinky? How are you doing?
All right.
Like your little dance there.
Thank you.
You're looking.
I got some crumbs in my boobs. Just give me a second.
Oh man. So, yeah, this is kind of an intense subject to talk about. So, and you do a lot of really amazing work in the community to help promote people of color, women, not just girl streamers. Like when I say community, I mean like the gaming industry. Like you are in there. You write beautiful blog posts and you get your hands dirty. And I think that's awesome. And I like we have these discussions all the time because we are good friends and we play games together. So what is it for you, like, that just draws you to this kind of work?
I mean, being who I am and growing up in a mostly white society.
I mean, it seems like a simple answer, but you know, some people don't know you. I mean, I know why. I know why.
This is true. So from an early age, if you are different, you are mostly put in your place as being different. My life wasn't too much like not surprisingly, I don't know. You know, I had a very German grandmother who would remind me that I look black.
Wow.
And when you start going to school, you're reminded that you're not looking like everybody else and all that kind of stuff. So, and for the longest time, I didn't really think anything of it. So
you just thought that was just how it was?
No, I didn't think anything of I didn't think I was different. Like no one,
I gotcha.
When I was young, my mom and them didn't really treat me as different.
Right.
But clearly I was. And like small farming town, Iowa, you know, you're gonna be pointed out pretty quickly. So
right.
I thought it was just odd my whole life because I was a very logical minded kid. I grew up with adults. I didn't really hang out with kids until I started going to school, and then I wasn't really on the same like level as them. Like I'm like, this doesn't make sense. This is not behavior that makes sense. But
right,
it's what a mass group will do, you know.
Yeah,
so
I mean, as society en masse are terrible. Like, we're just terrible en masse. We're terrible. Individually, we're significantly better, which is why communities like Girl Streamers pop up because of people who are different. They that way they have, I mean, and I hate to use the phrase safe space because it's become basically a meme at this point, but it is a safe space so that you can have like-minded people that you can convene with and share in life, right? Like the experience I have, because I am, I'm white, so I obviously didn't have to deal with that kind of pressure growing up, but I'm a dork, right? Like I was always fat. I got the fat shaming growing up, which resulted in really bad relationship with food for me. Um, so obviously that's shit that I've had to deal with. And so we've all had like some form of that kind of issue growing up. Obviously, there are some that are significantly worse. Racism being one of them. Uh, that's way worse than being fat shamed. At least for me, because
being fat shamed can be really, it can take psychological toll.
yeah,
And there are groups for that too. Like I'm in a group called Fat Girl Mafia, but the idea of
oh
these
yeah, I
communities,
forgot about them. They're really cool. I like them.
they're pretty nice. They to have a community that you can speak about your experience and then have them understand it.
Yeah,
It's a big deal. And particularly in our field, where it was perceived at least that it was male dominated, when in fact like females just kind of like laid back and weren't using their voice and all of this kind of stuff, like quite literally would not use their voice
right,
because of behaviors and harassment and all of that. And to finally have like not just one successful group, but like several that are out there that you can choose from that cater to just like a little bit different experiences, audiences, that kind of stuff, but still know that just being a woman in this industry is hard, but add the layers, being
right.
colored or fat or disabled or
Exactly. Exactly. It and it builds up, and when you are, I mean, the shared experience that you and I have is being female and gaming. Like we get yelled at constantly if either one of us says any, I mean, I was streaming one night and we were playing Siege and I got called a whore.
Yep.
Just because I'm a girl who was trying to play the game and who was
Yes.
actually trying to do a good job at playing the game, and it's disheartening because you know what, we'll take Overwatch for example, because I love Overwatch and I was actually talking about Overwatch earlier today and I've been watching the Overwatch League all day. I miss playing that game. One of the reasons why I stopped playing that game is because I got tired of being yelled at in competitive because I'm a girl. And I'm not bad at the game. I was actually really good when I was at my peak in Overwatch, but because I was a female, thank God there's no friendly fire in Overwatch. Because you be in games that has friendly fire, you're gonna get killed because it happens in Siege all the time just because you're a girl. And
Oh yeah.
I haven't played in 6 months because, and it's one of my favorite games because it takes that psychological toll on you, and you're just like, especially when your friends tend to play other games, so you're alone in playing these games, and then adding the streamer element on top of that, you get called out because you have to prove that you're good at the game. You have to prove that you know every detail about the game. And you have to prove, like, you have to show, like, you can't make a mistake. You absolutely 100% can't make a mistake, or you are screwed if you are not male in this industry. If you are, and I mean trans, women, anything, you know, even, you know, if you don't identify, like if you identify as non-binary, nothing, if you're not a man in the industry, you are shit on.
Well, let's get more to the point. If you are non white male, but even they, you know, face some harassment.
Right.
But at the same time, like, if you are other, it's not just like men don't have a free pass because they're hard on each other. You know what I'm saying? Like, the biggest defense for this kind of behavior is, oh, well, guys do it to each other all the time. Okay.
Oh my God.
Well, that's just normalizing shitty behavior instead of making people accountable for it.
I mean, I brought this up yesterday in the Cosmic Bulletin. Deadmau5 is a perfect example for this, and the most recent example of this. It's gamer culture. That doesn't excuse the behavior. Like, let's change the behavior, right? Like, why are we still why are we excusing that kind of behavior? Oh, it's been this way for 40 years. Okay, but why? Why is it still that way?
DT. Yep.
Minority disabled female over here. Shout out DT.
Yeah.
And we actually have some really amazing communities like GirlStreamers that focus on other things that we will also shout out throughout the podcast. Because there's a lot of communities out there, but I mean, these are the reason why, like, we have these communities so that we're not being yelled at, you know, so that we can't, like, I mean, we call ourselves the most dysfunctional squad on Twitch, and it's literally a group of girl gamers and Riley who play video games together. He's like the only male, but you know, it doesn't matter because he's not, you know, he's not garbage. Right? Like, he's just one of our followers that we have Slothy, we have Goose, we have Shaggy that have kind of just assimilated into the group that played these games together. And I mean, and it started out just girls wanting to play in a full squad without being yelled at.
True.
It literally started that way, and it stemmed from GirlStreamers. Like, we found each other literally through GirlStreamers.
Yeah. Except for Riley. Riley has been in my life for like 4 years.
Well, I found him through you, which technically is through GirlStreamers. So
yeah, that's like.
I mean, so one of the examples here, I'm actually going to play a clip for you guys to listen to. One of the examples is we have Apex. Just came out. It's been out for what, 4 days now? Like, it hasn't even been out that long. And a girl was
a week.
Yeah. This young lady who is a black female streamer playing the game was described in detail. Well, you know what? I'll just play it.
Don't be mad. A female is better. It's tacky. Yeah, it's 2019, dude. Happy Black History Month. Yeah, he's extra mad.
Oh my god.
Oh,
like,
it's a female. Hey,
oh, you couldn't tell from the voice?
I'm gonna rape you, kill you.
You could what?
Wow. So he can come. Oh, wow. He's so edgy.
I have an 8-inch knife. I'll cut out your fucking vagina.
Wow, bro, you're so edgy. What?
A
Did
little
those people
square.
die?
You cut
Or
upward, and then right before the belly button, sideways and then down.
What is wrong with this dude? Like, why is he detailing this? What a fucking weirdo.
he's just like
He
what?
needs Jesus.
I'm sorry, I should have given a warning there. This is gonna be extra graphic. He goes into detail how he's going to rape her and how he's going to cut her and slice her open. Because he found out she was a girl playing in this game. This week-old game. It hasn't
Not
been, like...
It's not even like just because she was a girl, it's because she was defending the women characters in the game. Like, it's fine that there were women characters in there. And he went out of his way, like, just to be disgusting. Like, I don't.
Like, it's graphic. Like, he is so graphic with how he's telling them. Like, I can see, like, it's almost like he's done it before. Like, dude, and that is why girl streamers exist. Like, that is why we have these communities, and so many people pop in. Like, by the way, if you guys have a question, make sure to fill out the Google form. Just type !podcast and it will pop up the link, and we will actually address your questions throughout the podcast. But it's mind-boggling to know, we are in 2019. The game industry has been around for 40 years, but none of these gaming companies seem to understand how toxic they are, actually perpetuating this toxicity by not having better reporting systems, by not actually banning and dealing with those toxic people. Like Siege, for example, all you have is a button that says report toxic behavior. Well, that could be anything, and that's such an easily abused thing. It does nothing but make your job harder on the moderator and community manager side of things for the game, because you can't just throw out, like, you just essentially throw out everything instead of saying, okay, let me go into detail about why this person's toxic. Like, we were discussing the other day, Dead by Daylight, right? Like, we've had to report people in Dead by Daylight, and we've been able to actually go in and write in detail what these people have done, why they, the kind of behavior that they have done, and I'll let you continue.
You know, I play both games, and I love both games, but it is odd for, like, a horror game that doesn't even have voice chat in it to do better on its reporting feature than a game that is esports, has the money behind it, and keeps on having, like, free weekends, sales, so that its base builds up, but it does nothing to really protect the base other than from hackers and cheaters, basically.
Right. And, yeah. No, sorry. Continue.
Like, I recently just had Ariel Rachels have, like, her first experience in the game, and she used voice. So they instantly knew that she was a girl. And they started whittling down her health or outright killing her in the game and telling her to go back to the kitchen. Like, cliche, of course, but it makes it a bad experience, especially if it's your first experience and you can do nothing about it. Like, right. There's nothing to be done.
And statistics show that women are actually more prevalent gamers than men are. there's actually more of us than there are of you, dudes. Y'all realize that, right? Like, there's actually more female gamers and more women, but you just don't know it because we don't talk because of those reactions, you know? And like Joji girl in chat right now, she said, I had that happen in my stream. I was playing Super Seducer and a guy came in talking about wanting to drug and rape a woman in the girl and in the game, and he says it's legal, so it's okay to say. Like, what?
It's legal?
First off, that's not legal. But second off, like, what? Like, what? What? It just, like, and these are just, that's just streaming. So if you're a streamer on top of a gamer, you're adding in the gaming toxicity and then the people who come into your chat and, you know, call you names. And one of the things that people don't understand, like that phrase of, you know, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. A broken bone heals usually stronger than your heart can. Like, your mind takes things way differently than your physical self, and it is a lot harder to get over something. And when you are constantly being pushed down, you know, threatened, stalked, for example, and not getting help for any of that stuff, it weighs on you, and you end up getting, yes, we do support trans, and if you are trans, we have a lot of trans ladies in our community, and like it's just it's exhausting to have your work online and you're just constantly having to wade literally through the shit to find the gold, right? Like, we do this because we love it. This is our jobs. Like, we do these because we love our job. We love, like, this, just the industry is great. It's a beautiful thing. It's creatively amazing, but it doesn't do anything to help anyone except for one type of person. Right? Like, it's just, and on the stalker aspect of it, we're kind of all over with this discussion, but there's just so much. Like, it's literally just a roundtable discussion. We want you guys to actually be a part of this discussion. Women get stalked really bad. And it's actually more...
even just people get stalked really bad. There's no real laws for the cyber community to get help with this kind of harassment. And it can be invasive and change your life habits. So not only do some people are just like, oh, it's just like a nuisance, just Walking Bad, but you can't, because they make multiple accounts, they find out your personal information, they can send stuff to your home, like all this kind of stuff, and what's being done? Like, nothing's being done.
We actually know of several friends who actually have been through these things.
Yes. And the laws need to catch up there.
Yeah.
And Mav's right that I have a wall of mods in my stream for for various reasons. And he doesn't get the chance usually to ban people, but he gets excited when he does. And they will get personally offended. He's absolutely right. And they will PM people, not just like the mods in the chat, but like random people in the chat about why they got banned. Like, why they banned me? Like, I
It was
just dropped
just a
the N
joke.
word. It
Why'd
was
you
just a
ban
joke.
me? Well,
Yeah.
because it's not funny.
No.
These things are not funny.
Um.
Words hurt and they are taxing. You know, one person doing it, yeah, okay. So take a moment to be in the mind of a troll. They think that it's funny because they're going to do it to this person one time for themselves, right? But what they don't understand is that person that they're trolling has been trolled multiple times by the same thing before they ever came into play. So, you know, some people will try to. Wow, your husband just walked by dancing and it just distracted me. It made me laugh. And yeah. But so, you know, I get why you think it's funny, but you need to understand why it's not. Cuz one, the N word should never be in your vernacular. It's a terrible word, and you know, I'll be honest, I grew up with that word in my vernacular because I grew up in the South, right? That is a whole other world. But I also grew up knowing that's not a good word to say in public, right? So I learned not to say it in public. And as I got educated and learned more about the history of it, it just left my vocabulary because it's not something that needs to be said. And people will argue, well, language changes. Well, yeah, it does. But some words take a hell of a lot longer to change. And the history behind that word is still there, still prevalent, and still is fucking used for the same reason it was used 200 years ago. So, no, that word has not changed. The meaning of that word still stands today as it did 200 years ago. So that's why you shouldn't use certain language because it hasn't evolved. Just sometimes they won't, and you have to understand that because you're not just using a word to be funny or be trolly. You're using a word that has a history, a horrible, horrible history for a laugh. And that's not okay. Because you're...
I don't think, for me, I don't think they're doing it for a laugh even. Whenever I hear that word and it's directed towards me or someone that's with me or just any person of color, I think it is to put them in their place. In their place as other, and to hurt them and make sure everybody knows that they think they are lesser than.
Yeah, I would agree with. Yeah, I can see that. It's the same.
So it makes me cringe. But at this juncture in my life, at being 34 years old, you know, you've heard it so many times from not just strangers, but family members and school mates, peers, and then just, you know, just a random people, just wherever. And it's like, I know what this is. It's not original. It's not your place. And at this point, like, in my stream, you just get banned, but it'll always open up a dialogue because you're not putting me in my place. I'm not gonna let that happen. And no one should be allowed to do that.
Right.
Period.
And because you know your worth. You know your value as a human being, which is high. Everybody has value in this world. Even assholes have value. And you it takes a while to develop a thick skin. It does. Like, we're both in our 30s. And, you know, 10 years ago, people calling me fat hit a hell of a lot harder than it does now, right? 10, 15 years ago, people, like, that was the biggest issue I got, was the fat shaming. And then when I was sexually assaulted, the slut shaming came, right? Because it was my fault, which is a whole other discussion that we're not here to discuss. Well, I guess it kind of, slut shaming is also in that parameter of why marginalized communities exist. But but yeah, like you get these, because like you said, it is to put you in your place. And yeah, fart wiener, that's how yeah, they do it because it makes people mad, and they find making people mad hilarious. And yeah, that's totally another way of why, totally another reason why people use in words, they slut shame, you know, the whole titty streamer witch hunt, right? Like, okay, what is wrong if a girl wants to show her boobs or show her assets? What if she's not even attempting to, like, push them up or anything? They just happen to be there. What is wrong with that? Boobs inherently are not sexual. They're primarily meant for reproductive reasons and helping feed children, right? Like,
no, you don't have to pay attention to what you wear on stream. You absolutely do not have to. I have biggins.
That's a great
They're
question,
humongous.
Luna. And no, I think in regards of, like, you know, you do need to pay attention, like, make sure you're not hanging out everywhere, but, like, you
as
don't.
long as it's terms of service, you're not. It's not
Yeah.
a problem,
Right.
right?
Right. Exactly.
But just the slut shaming or any shaming is to put you in your place. That's what it's meant to do, and evoke a reaction. Well, people who say, like, words are just words have always, like, bothered and confused me. And I'll post my thing about it probably tonight or tomorrow. But just to, like, put off words like they have no power is ridiculous, because that's exactly what words were meant for.
Agreed.
To communicate.
Kinky wrote a beautiful, beautiful piece about words and their meanings behind them, and why it matters what you say and what comes out of your mouth. I mean, even in religious terms, you know, across the board, religions say, be careful what you say. It's not just like one religion over another. Most, if not all, religions preach that whole thing of, like, the tongue is like a dagger, right? Like, that's a very common thing taught across the board. Like, there is an element to words that people forget. And when you're behind a computer screen, it's a hell of a lot easier to be anonymous. I mean, I was bullied into almost committing suicide when my husband and I started dating, because a girl in his guild was obsessed with him and sent all of her little cronies after me, and they berated me. And looking back, like, yeah, I could have just turned it off, but it was in a game that I loved to play, and I wanted to be with this person online, and this is what I had to deal with to be with this person, because he meant that to me. obviously we got rid of the shitty people, but there were a few months of that horrendous that harassment just because I liked somebody. So we have to be careful of what we say to people. And again, circling back, like when we have communities like this, we have to be careful of like what you say in those communities. And because you don't want to gatekeep, you don't want to tell people that they can't feel something that they feel. Like, you have every right to feel what you feel. And some communities are bad with that whole gatekeeping mentality. Like, and that is something that, at least us at Girl Streamers, we strive to not do. And there's many other communities who strive for that as well. And it definitely, I agree. You shouldn't have to have a thick skin. You should be okay to feel the things you want to feel. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. Like, we have to build up this thick skin to deal with it because that's how it is. And that's what we want to change.
But I think overall, you should feel your emotions and you shouldn't hide them and you should talk about them. I think where we lack as a society is how to communicate them effectively, particularly if you are in a relationship, friendship, or whatever, to those people that are perhaps skirting the line and they may not know it. Like, some things aren't meant for you and you should not say them, right?
Right.
And to be able to, for me to feel safe enough to approach you and be open and say, that makes me uncomfortable when you, I don't know. What is something people... Oh, there was a discussion on Twitter today about people who compare their skin color to people of color, like Black people of color, and like compare their tans. And I would get that a lot when I was a kid.
Wait,
Like,
what?
at the end of this, yeah. So at the end of summertime, when everybody has their tans, and I'm in a very white community, but some people are like, will come up to me, compare their skin color, and be like, oh, well, I'm darker than you. That's not okay. And if I had known that was the microaggression when I was a child, I probably would have said something.
What? Like,
yes.
But what's going on in their mind to, like, is it to prove that you're not a person of color? Like, that has nothing to do with you, whether or not
they think it's like a funny little joke. Yes, like, oh, I'm almost as dark as you, or that's right. They think it, yes. So
okay,
that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So as an adult, if someone came up to me and did that now, I'll be like, no. It's definitely a thing. There's a whole thread about it on Twitter, actually. But I remember this because it would happen every summer, not without hesitation. Without hesitation, every summer I would hear,
that is interesting.
Well, I'm darker than you, and they'd always do like the arm. They put their arm next to mine. Yeah. So like,
they are raised without knowing about microaggressions. Exactly. And obviously kids at that age don't know what they're doing, but the problem is
it's still happening with adults now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where the problem is. And it's hard to I'll be honest, it's hard to take that, like, I have, like, looking back and going, man, I was a terrible person, right? Like, because
No, I don't think you're a terrible person. You're just not educated.
right, but some people don't want to be educated. They don't care. And when someone brings out, that's not really okay, they get really defensive instead of like what we're doing, having an actual conversation and understanding why it's not okay. They get defensive and are like, well, I'm just trying to joke around and blah blah blah. And it's like, hold up, man, I'm just trying to tell you this isn't okay. Like, you have to stop saying your skin is darker than mine. Like, that's, it's not really that funny. It's kind of dismisses who I am, right? Like,
Or much so dismisses the issues that come with having that skin color.
Oh, Mav wants us to explain what a microaggression is. I think that's a fair question. We can do that.
We can do that.
I'll look up the Webster's dictionary and we'll go from there.
Let's go.
So, microaggressions are so
I'm better at giving examples than the definition, but
let me actually find definition. The actual definition of a microaggression. Okay, so a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or ethnic minority. So basically, it is you making a statement that is subtly racist. And some people are aware that they're making those subtle racist comments. Some people are not. It's basically not overt racism.
It's not in your face. It's not saying the N-word, but it is like, oh, you're pretty for a black girl.
Or you're pretty for a fat girl. Or you're pretty for an older lady. Or, yeah.
Yeah, that's microaggression.
Oh, touching your hair, yeah.
Or touching your hair. Or the comparing skin tones, or it's basically like subtly saying something under your breath and them just barely catching it kind of feel. Like, it wasn't meant as a compliment, but it's kind of disguised as a compliment kind of deal. Like, you got
dancing around the word. That's, Luna, that's a great way to put it. And here's the thing. We've all done it. Not really realizing that we have done it. And that's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person. The thing is, you have to learn from that and stop doing that.
Yeah. Like, I don't think the majority of people who do these things are bad people. There are malicious people who do these things.
Right.
But at the same time, there are just people who are not educated and need to be open enough to listen to the voices that are trying to explain, teach, or they can be proactive enough to learn, to look it up, and try to change their behavior on their own. But they have to know that their behavior is problematic to begin with and not try to shrug it off.
Right.
And I think that's where we have the biggest problem, because some people don't realize.
Yeah. And they don't, and you don't want someone to look at you and tell you that's not okay, because it's a bad feeling. It is. I mean, a couple of years ago, it's been more than a couple of years. It's been a few years. A very good friend of mine who is a black female posted a very long, well-written blog post about racism and the systematic issues and stuff. And reading it, my knee-jerk reaction was, well, I don't do these things. This is not fair to say all white people do this, right? Like, my knee-jerk reaction was to be defensive. So I had to stop and I had to check myself because it hurt. Like, it got my heart racing because it hurt because I felt like I was a bad person because of the fact that I'm a white person. And when that thought went through my mind, I realized this is how we have made other people feel because of who they are. And that is why, as a white person, this is very important to me to help not raise awareness, because we all are aware of it, to change it, to change that conversation, to, you know what? There are amazing Black communities in the industry. Like, I Need Diverse Games, Cookout Fam, Black Girl Gamers. They're great, and I follow them on all the stuff, retweet all their stuff, and I can't be a part of them because I'm not Black, but that's okay. But they need to exist.
And you can still be an ally. Right,
you can, but you can't call yourself an ally. That marginalized group needs to call you an ally. Like, I can't say, I'm an ally of LGBT, I'm an ally of Black people, I'm an ally of Asian people. I can't do that. That is not my right to say that, because I am not that marginalized person.
My most annoying microaggression that I get is, you don't talk like a Black person.
Oh my God. I hate to say that I've heard that on numerous occasions.
But
okay.
What does that mean? Like,
right? Like, okay. Yeah.
Yes, I grew up in primarily white society, but even beyond that, my dad doesn't talk what they would say was like a ghetto.
What's that movie that is literally about this with
Dear White People?
No, not Dear White People. It is, what's his face who is in the movie with Danny Glover? Danny Glover's in it, and he's like, you have to put on your white voice to succeed. Oh my God, I can't think of that movie. That's exactly what this is about. What you're talking about. That's exactly what that movie is about.
Okay. I haven't seen that one.
I haven't seen it, but the trailer is like, hilarious. Also, Dear White People is fantastic, by the way. I highly recommend watching the movie and the series. Anyway, sidebar.
You can say that you're trying to be. Yeah, you can say you're trying to be an ally for sure. What more so says you're an ally is your behavior and how you call out behaviors that are counterintuitive to being supportive. And
Sorry to Bother You is the name of the film.
Sorry to Bother You? Okay.
Yeah. You should check it out.
I get told because of the way I talk. Because yeah.
Oh, that's another movie, Luna. That's another movie. Yeah, where he goes undercover.
The Black Klansman.
The Black Klansman. Yeah. So biologically, tonally, there's a deeper register for people of color, but that's about the only difference as far as talking black or talking white, right? The inherent the microaggression of that is a person who talks the way I talk sounds more educated. So when you say you don't sound like a black person, you're insinuating that she sounds educated, whereas other people who don't talk like her sound uneducated. And that is not true in the least bit. And it's not okay.
I just think stereotypes hurt. You
They
know?
do.
Period. And I don't know, like you people are around, like most people at this point in time have been around multiple people of color and understand that we all pretty much speak English. Like even if there's slang in it, you know, it's still the same language. And when I do say slang or whatever, that's still, I'm still educated.
Right.
I'm still equal to, like, I'm not less than for having that, and it doesn't make me less of a person of color to speak in an educated manner.
No, the language thing is not exclusive to person of color, because I also get that, Mav, because I'm a Southerner and I don't sound like a Southerner. And Southerners, like, if you sound like this, you sound like an idiot. Like they're just gonna chalk you up to being stupid. Like that's totally accurate. That's totally true. Some people change how they talk around me. Oh, I've actually experienced that as well, Luna. Like, yeah, it is. But talking about microaggressions, like, that's exactly what a microaggression is. That's a great example, and that is actually a microaggression that goes beyond just race. It actually, everybody, well, not everybody, but most people actually experience that, because I mean
to differing levels, though. Let's
right
dial it back right there. You may be from the South, they may expect something from you, but they still think you're probably educated and fine to a degree, more so than if I spoke in what they think is ghetto, and
you'd be immediately written off. Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the levels there, the what gets past what gets forgiven, let's say, also it largely depends on how you look, let's just say.
Yeah, I would agree.
You're good.
Oh, I hate that you're from down south, so you date your cousins. Yeah.
There's so many stereotypes, and they can hurt everybody. They can hold everybody back. Yes. But don't forget, there is still like a level of privilege, and people get very touchy about that word.
Oh yeah.
But it's true. There's a level of privilege for those that are not people of color.
Right. And you cannot change what you can't change what you were born. Like, you were born a person of color, you're going to stay a person of color. You're born a white person, you're going to stay a white person. who you were born as inherently does not make you a bad person. It is your actions. It is how you behave. It is your response to people and treating the way you treat other people. And again, like, I know I keep trying to bring it back to marginalized communities and why communities like Girl Streamers exist, because it allows that safe space from that toxicity and allows us to essentially gather around and say, okay, we would like to address this issue. How can we address this issue? How can we look at this issue? How can we help each other improve and possibly educate those people in this issue? I
mean, it is a safe space to a degree, but even within those spaces, so education has to happen.
Yeah.
And the reason we exist should be to also educate beyond our group.
Yes, exactly.
Because not just one person can do it. The emotional, mental burden that is put on marginalized groups to explain even just their existence majority of the time, but even it gets to me like, why can't you do some of the work?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And having more people who understand where you're coming from is great, but still, society as a whole still needs to take the reins and like do some of the work. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just, it should not just be up to us.
Right.
Unfortunately.
It gets taxing. It is very taxing, and it drains you when you feel like there's nothing going. I mean, just look at the civil rights movement. I mean, I know we are heavily discussing people of color here, but this is not exclusive to just people of color. But the civil rights, you had Martin Luther King Jr. trying to do it peacefully for a very long time and getting so far. And then you had Malcolm X coming in with a little bit more aggression, who helped push it even farther. Like, but that was two like major segments, and we haven't gotten beyond their movements because nobody else has stepped. Nobody, as a society, we haven't said, okay, let's take what these men have done and improve upon it. And that's the problem.
I don't know.
And I don't think it's just the like civil rights movement. I think like we should have learned from the civil rights movement and how we're treating the LGBT civil rights movement, right? Like, why are we going through the same issues? Like, why is it taking so long to actually allow people to be married, whoever? Like, why did it take so long for that to happen? And why is there that scare that may be taken away now, right? Like, we're not learning from history.
I mean, it's true. Because there's always going to be people seen as less than. That's just reality, unfortunately, and there will always be a fight. But what the bigger, I feel like the bigger picture is who's giving the permission, right? Like, in my mind, here's the bigger problem. When when these groups don't exist, it means people can ignore the actual issues, and the majority gets to give the permission on what gets to exist, what gets to have their space. In these cases, it is the white majority. It is what we think is the straight majority, or the louder voices, or the people with the money, or the people with the power. Right. Unfortunately. And because the people with the power also are the people with the money, because of how society has been set up,
right,
very much against, especially minorities, there's always going to be a fight. And Martin Luther King understood why people turned to violence. He wasn't against it. People have to understand.
A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that either.
He understood when people are saying this a million times and not being heard and not being seen as people. He understood why they turned to violence. He understood Malcolm X's side.
Yep.
Period. But it was not his route to take.
Right.
And
there
what
is
was
no
interesting.
There's
what was
no
interesting.
Sorry.
Was a comic book movie helped a lot of people understand that through Black Panther. What you saw basically was like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And for me, the big revelation was to identify more with the perceived villain, because he lived that life. He saw people struggle. He did all of this. And then he came to the conclusion that no one was going to hear him until he made people hurt.
Yeah.
And that is a humongous, that's something everybody should just like sit and think about when it comes to marginalized people. All of it could turn very, very violent, and it did for a long time, and it still is in various ways. But there are people that are trying to accept help and ally from those that are willing to listen and help lift the voice. And that's a humongous deal for me, at least. And I feel like we shouldn't lessen that, but there's a reason why certain things happen and why people take the actions they do.
Yeah.
And to have empathy and understanding in that regard. It may take time for those who don't understand, but if you try, at least, that's a step forward instead of staying stagnant or going backwards.
I agree. And you know, it's funny you say that about understanding the villain and siding with the villain, right? For the longest time, like, only because of the way the education system works, I was like, man, Malcolm X just did it wrong, right? Like, I remember thinking, like, Malcolm X, like, why did he have to take the anger route? Why did he have to be aggressive? Why do people get so angry and get, you know, that way. But as I have gotten older and learned more and actually been more heavy-handed, like, I've gone to marches, I have physically gotten into the fight to learn more. I understand so much more, and I totally get his perspective so much more. And it's like, he wasn't a villain, he was just fed up, literally done. And I and that is a problem that white society doesn't understand unless they actually get into it. We are not getting off of our high horses and getting dirty and getting into the trenches to understand what people of color, what other is dealing with, and what those marginalized communities are going through. And except for the few white people who have, obviously, it is, education is important. And people, I agree, people don't want to learn, because I 100% agree with Silky's statement. Education is important. People don't want to learn. They don't want to embrace the truths and see what is really happening out there. They want to stay ignorant, because when when you stay in that naive state, you don't get jaded. You don't get sick and tired of seeing crap. It and you don't.
But that's your privilege.
Right.
Right? You get to sit in your privilege. It
Yeah.
doesn't bother me, so it's not an issue.
Exactly.
Instead of empathizing with those around you, because that takes mental energy and physical energy and thoughtfulness, forethought. You know, so
Slothy, your statement is Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were both right in their way to fight for right. There is a time and place for aggression, and there's a time and place for peace, and deciding what that time and place is. I will agree, and I will also put out there that I don't think there's a wrong way when you're trying to make it a better place for people, right? Like, sometimes you have to be aggressive to get the point across. And sometimes you just sit there and don't say anything to get the point across. I 100% agree with that statement. And you know, and I know this is a really heavy subject for us to talk about, and we're bringing this to you guys out of just education, and I don't know. I have been lucky in finding a great friendship with Kinky, and it has actually opened my eyes to a lot more stuff that, like, I didn't understand personally. And she writes so well, and she's so good at explaining things to people, and you just have to want to hear her. You have to want to hear other people who are not like yourself. And we actually have questions that I think actually are a good segue here. Zombie Kittens asks, how can we make sure that these groups stay intersectional? Like, communities like this that are going out there trying to do the job, change the conversation, essentially. Like, how do we stay intersectional? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
You have to be self-aware. Like, it's easy to get off track. It's easy to get distracted. But if you remember your original goal and that you can grow from that and continue to do that work, you have to be aware that you can't lose sight of that. And sometimes some groups do.
Yeah.
And they become about more me instead of us.
Yeah. And I mean, just in the past couple years, we've seen communities rise up and then self-destruct because their focus isn't actually what they say their focus is on. And I think having diverse leadership in any community, whether it is a specific marginalized community or a community as a whole, will keep you it'll just help keep you more accountable to staying on track, right? And not having like a single person running everything. Because one, that's going to get taxing on that one single person. I mean, just look at all the stuff that we do here. Like, we have the podcast, we have Cosmic Bulletin, we have the community night, we have like what 1,400 girls in the Discord that are, you know, and probably about 10% of that are really active. And we have our Twitter and our social media that we run. One person can't do all of that. So you have to bring on people that you trust, people who are not quite like you, because if everybody is the same, you're not going to stick to that diversity that you are reaching for, right? Like, you have to make an effort to be diverse. You have to make an effort.
Other voices that even you may not always agree with or may not agree with all the time, but because of where they are coming from, they're seeing things in a different light.
Yeah. And you can and it allows you to have good discussions like this and be able to make better, more informed, better educated decisions as a whole for a community such as GirlStreamers. Obviously, we refer ourselves because, you know, this is our podcast. But there are so many communities who do a good job like that. I've already mentioned some of them. Queer Women Gamers, the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Gamers is actually, we have one of our ladies is our deaf Babelfish, who actually helps run that over there. It's Gold Branson. So like we work very well with a lot of other, like, we try to work with other and promote other marginalized communities because we're all doing the same thing. We're all trying to better the industry, which hopefully will better society as a whole eventually. But, you know, the gaming industry is such a volatile community right now, and it is up and down. You see these great stories of this, you know, these amazing things, and then you see these terrible stories of shit happening. It's up and down constantly, and we need to promote each other that are out there doing the work, because as Kinky stated earlier, like, we can't just have, you know, one group doing it. Everybody needs to do it.
Yeah. I'm gonna touch on Slothy's thing, and then I will give my response to Cariza's. White privilege is a thing. It does exist. We can't ignore it. Problem is, because marginalized people have faced so much, sometimes seeing people try to genuinely understand, express their experiences or anything like that, it seems disingenuous. And that's kind of a bias on our end from our experiences. But but don't disregard that, because it's all part of the same monster.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So,
Well, that's, I mean, saying that we should stop using the phrase, I mean, if you believe that we should stop using that phrase, then what's the point of communities like this existing? Like, if you think that that's a bad phrase to use, then I guess our community shouldn't.
no, I get why it can be thrown at you and feel like it hurts, and they are using it to belittle what you're saying.
Yeah.
But at the same time, try and think, like, are you trying to relate to them an experience that isn't quite the same as what they have brought forward? Is that why they're saying it? Or are they kind of just a little jaded, you know, because of the world, unfortunately? That in itself takes empathy to
Yeah.
realize maybe why they are why they or me or you know are responding that way. But don't ever stop trying to relate, you know, or understand. More so understand than relate, because we all have our own experiences. Which is why, you know, finding a community is so important, because even within, like, I'm part of GirlStreamers, but I know that a large group of GirlStreamers may not understand the bulk of what I go through, like, on a daily basis by streaming with a cam and interacting with general society. But there are women of color in there that do. So we can take the time to relate our stories and help them understand why maybe one person will bring up that well, you don't see this because this is just your white privilege, and they'll use it kind of like as a, I don't know,
It's almost a put down, but not really a put down. Like it's. I don't want to say it's almost like It's almost like putting them in their place, but it kind of is. It kind of is.
oh, a little bit.
Because you're like, you know, your place is up there. Like, go be up there in your place, and that's also bad.
Yeah. So what it isn't just about society changing their thought patterns. Like, we also have to be open to the idea that people are trying to change.
Yeah.
And we can't forgive everything because some of it's super terrible, but we gotta recognize that people can change and give them room to do so.
Yeah.
And that I find we are struggling with, because when people bring up tweets from 40 years ago and then ostracize the person for now, even though they've changed,
and
that is counterintuitive to what we're trying to do.
Exactly. And again, and I'll continue using this, actions speak louder than words. Like, if you said something or you did something 40 years ago and you like are like, yeah, that was terrible, and it's been proven throughout your history that you have changed, you know, obviously you're not that person you were 40 years ago, right? Like, you have accepted that, okay, I did a bad thing. You know, it's a lot harder to see the change in a year or two, but when it's been 10, 20, 30, etc., it's a little bit more obvious, and we should stop hounding these people for things they said or did back then if they have proven that they, you know, if they've proven that they are not that person.
I mean,
Forgiveness is very
you
important.
should address it. You should address it and give them a chance to speak on it.
Right, you don't want to
If
ignore
their
it.
behavior hasn't continued from there, you know,
Right.
then
But firing,
take it forward.
forcing people to lose their job over something that they did, you know, 40 years ago or said 40 years ago, even though they don't do that, they've proven that they don't do that. They've accepted, and then they've addressed it, right? And they've said, I did that, and I'm sorry for doing that. I don't.
Which is drastically different from doing blackface or whatever and then making an excuse for it after
Yes.
you've gotten caught. Drastically different things than what we're
Like-
talking about here. Like, some people realize their behavior was problematic and they're willing, well, they should say as much. Some people don't see it as problematic at all and try to just make excuses. There's the difference. However, Mav, white privilege isn't about being rich. Poor white people still have privilege.
My husband's is, I mean, he'll be the first to tell you, he is a welfare child. He grew up a family of 3 boys and a single mom, so they had to have welfare. But he is fully aware of the advantages that he has gotten because he's a white man over his friends who are not whites. Like, he's aware. Like, you don't have to be rich to have privilege.
Right. So, just touch on that.
Can we take a short break, or do you have a statement? Because I really have to pee really quick.
No, I can just
Okay, all right.
address Carrie's question if you want.
Oh, okay, you do that. I'll leave it up.
Sure. We're unsupervised. No, I'm kidding. Do you have a vision of a personal utopia? Can you share it with them? And I gotta say, I don't. I don't have. I think the closest would be that everybody has the ability to empathize, but I know realistically, personality traits and some personality disorders will not allow you to do that, or it makes it very hard. But for the vast majority of society, they do have that ability, and I feel like that is probably my biggest that would be my biggest desire, I think. I agree with that.
You guys are killing it with the responses. I'm doing my best to pay attention to Kinky and chat. So if we are delayed a little bit in responding to you guys, don't worry. It's
my bag and wall. What is this one I am? Some of which are my no. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. What white privilege means is that if you were standing in front of a person and let's go with Dennis. A person is going to make assumptions on both of you. And the likelihood of that person making negative assumptions towards Dennis over you is what gives you the privilege. That's it. That's as simple as it gets. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with how much money you have. There is financial privilege, and there is there's different kinds of privilege, but the white privilege is very simple, and it's very assuming, and it hurts society as a whole. It's not just hurting minorities, but it hurts everybody because then there is a bigger rift.
Yeah.
But understand that it really doesn't have to do with money or where you were raised or any of that. Now, you may see more of it in various places in America, but that also has to do with like South versus North kind of. That's it's a big whole other issue. But overall, very simple. What the bare bones of it comes down to. Don't look at your money. You can't look at your, whether your parents had money or not. That's a different level. That's a whole different level.
Those people are not exclusive to white people, because there are people of color who parents had money and they also act like tool bags. Like, I've met some. So that's that like money privilege thing is not exclusive to white people. It's just more prevalent because of the system.
Systematic. Issues. And that's fine. Like I get being poor, but there was a difference between being white poor and black poor. You may get more help regarding in terms of what color you are.
Here, so okay. Being from the South, here is a way, just a simple thing that I have heard people say in my lifetime. Oh, he's just down on his luck. Versus, well, they just don't do anything to help themselves.
Yes.
It's that simple. Even though they're both in the same position, they're both literally down on their luck. They just, a white guy or woman is down on their luck versus a person of color. Well, they're just lazy. They just don't want to work.
What? Yeah.
That is literally
is what's perceived, not
what is happening.
Yes.
So that it's the perception that needs to change, right? Like, and that's the whole.
But that's not entirely true. They'll perceive you as someone more trustworthy, more likely,
less threatening.
Less threatening to consider hiring, consider helping, consider moving forward. Whereas a person of color, because of a history of stereotypes and that kind of stuff. There is just a perceived assumption that they are lazy or uneducated or any of that. That is the different level that gives white privilege a bump. That's it. It's not okay, well, you're homeless and they're homeless, and that should make you equal. I mean, it should. But when someone's looking at you and looking at a person of color, they're going to see something different and make assumptions on what society has made out of stereotypes, out of assumptions, out of
there
falsehoods.
have been articles that are false, but that come out and say like, well, you know, the incarceration, right? There are more black people incarcerated than white people, even though white people commit more crimes than black people. That's actually a true statistic. However,
and I know he's seen that and made comments on it, like,
right. But the thing is, like, there are people who, and I've heard this, I've read articles of people actually saying this, and it blows my mind, but they say, I have seen this, which is just, it drives me insane. Black people have a more aggressive gene, which is why they are more threatening. And I'm putting all of this in quotes because I don't think it's true, but it is a perception that has been put on, especially the black male, black male people. Like, I don't know what, I lost my term that I was going to use, but it is a perception that is not, it's not true. It's a stereotype that is not true in the least bit. So therefore, a white person, which could actually be the more aggressive person, is going to be less threatening because he feels less threatening than the black person. And that is a thing that has been taught, a thing that is inherent, and it's very prevalent in specific areas in the country.
Sir? I mean, I don't know. I think
that's a really simple way of looking at things. That comment. In an ideal world, we would just hire the person who is more qualified, right? I don't think people second guess themselves if they turn down a person of color over a white person nearly as much as you think they do. Being a professional person, being an entrepreneur, having a husband who is a professional, that's not that prevalent. As far as people second guessing themselves, and maybe it's just because we run in circles of people that are decent. I think it's more of an issue maybe for Fortune 500 companies with bigotry views, but on a whole, the law of hiring, the diversity law that exists is a good thing that needs to exist. You need to have you need to have diversity in your job field, like. So I can understand that thought process, but I don't think it's as prevalent as people think it is.
I don't know. Irish. So my thought is a lot of. I've had several jobs, and I've been the only person of color in a lot of them. You know, yes, I am
Bless you.
qualified. I'm trained, but I know there are other people who are qualified and trained that look like me. You know what I'm saying? And
I think it happens.
A back and forth on it. I think it does happen, but at the same time, then you see like the issues Gucci is having right now, right?
Oh my god.
So
I don't know who okayed that design.
Like what? If you have people from all over, you have those voices, you have those opinions, you have those experiences, and it's important not to just have a group of one voice, one opinion, one experience.
Yeah. So
how do people feel about?
I want to address Shanbot's question because I think that's a great question. I don't want to go too in depth about the cop issue only because that could be a 5-hour discussion.
I can.
I mean, I think
Not that I can. We can discuss it on my stream, but like I'm not, because it can also get kind of
it can get political.
Political.
I mean, and yes, the stuff we're talking about is kind of political, but the cop issue, that is such a hot topic thing that we're not really prepared to discuss appropriately, and it is in itself its own little bubble to discuss. So I see what you guys are saying. We appreciate what you guys are saying. But we want, that is definitely something that I personally don't feel we can address in the time frame that we have for this podcast tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So Shamba asked, how do you both feel about name blind recruitments? I think that kind of falls back on the whole, well, you don't sound white thing, right? Because Black people have crazy names, right? But if you actually look at the history of those Black names, there is actually history, right? What was it? Shay. What was the name? I can't remember the name, but it's actually Shaniqua, I believe, was the name. And there was, I saw a Twitter thread, and then I looked it up, and I was like, this is actually really interesting. You know, people are constantly saying, well, why can't you just name your kid a regular name? Why can't you just give your kid like Tom or Jerry or some bullshit name like that, right? A white name is what they're saying. A white name. Why can't you give your kid a white name? And the thread actually was about why Shaniqua is actually a really good name, because it is a goddess. That it's a name, it's a play on the name of a goddess in African culture. So it's actually a very rich and powerful name for your heritage. And we downplay that. So I actually think that name blind recruitment is good, because when you read somebody's name, there's a stereotype there in the names. There's a complete stereotype there. Sorry, I'll let you can address. You can answer the question.
I mean, yeah. Hiring people on their experience and education, I think, is a smart move. Like, instead of seeing a name and then someone automatically rolls their eyes and they're like, okay, well, why are we even wasting our time with this?
Mm-hmm.
It gives people a chance. It's basically like the voice for employment. So
It is.
I will say I'm for it. As for Gucci is selling products, wants to sell products in America. That's where they make a majority of their money. They know the history. Let's be real. They know the history. And it isn't like Italy, France, or any of them haven't had their own problems or do not still largely struggle with their own problems with race issues.
Yep.
So I'll leave it at that, but let's not explain it away like that. That's not how that's gonna work. But
yes, DT, handicapped people are. The job interview process is such a horrible process for people. And that, again, I hate to say it, but that's where white privilege actually comes into play most prevalently. Because, you know, if you're handicapped, people assume you can't do the job. If you're being overweight actually is a huge factor in getting hired. Being old or being too young is also a major factor in getting hired. Being a non-white person is also a big factor in whether or not you're hired. And a lot of people think that it's only exclusive, like the Non-Discriminatory Act is only for, you know, people of color. No, if you can prove that you are not hired because you're handicapped or because you're fat or because of ageism, that is against that law. So it's not exclusive. It's just it's easier to prove with persons of color than it is like for me being fat, right? Like, so but yeah.
But what I'm saying, I don't know how to say it. Osiris, is you should know those histories. America largely focuses on America and not even like the worst parts of America usually in their history books, and that is problematic. Period. To know that all the indigenous people in almost every single country get shit on by every government, you should know that. You should know that. You should know that about Canada. Their indigenous problem here is as bad, or if not worse, than America.
Like,
did you know that? Because I didn't when I moved here.
I didn't either until GirlStreamers, because Dead Mannequin, who is the person who started GirlStreamers, is indigenous. I had no idea. I thought it was America that was so bad.
Nope. So the people treated in the indigenous people in Australia 10 times as worse. Like, no, you should know these things. You should know these things because it helps you emphasize with not only just your society, but the world over.
And as far as creating products and selling them in other markets, you need to do that research. That is part of your job. There's literally a job called market research. There's no excuse. I'm sorry. There isn't. You should know better.
We know people who look at us differently. Yeah, that's true, DT. That's true. And it's hard to get past your biases, your assumptions, and your stereotypes that have been drilled in your head for years.
Mm-hmm.
It takes actual work to say no. If I see a blonde person, they aren't stupid just because they're blonde.
Yeah, and saying shit like I had a blonde moment is technically a microaggression. That's kind of bad. Yeah.
Towards yourself. Some of the smartest people I know are blonde. Like high IQ, amazing
My
brain.
husband's
Just
a blonde, and he's extremely
so
smart.
and that's just like a simple example, but like I'm saying, like um to live on those stereotypes, to help perpetuate those stereotypes, it hurts everybody. So
My hair isn't blonde right now, but it's been blonde in the past. Deliberately been blonde in the past. So anyway.
Anyway, Shamba had another question on the.
Yeah, I got it pulled up right here. Would you want to see the need for communities like girl streamers decrease in the future, and how would you see that happening? Ideally, I think, yeah, but we're real talking right now. That's never gonna happen.
And Coulter is just a mean-spirited demon. It doesn't matter what color her hair is; it has nothing to do with her soul. Period. Period. However, answering Shanwa's question, I would love to see maybe a reduction in needing these, but I think this will always be needed because as much as people can empathize, they still cannot go through what you go through. Not every person can. So to have a place where you can voice those specific issues, problems, even good moments that may not seem big to someone who doesn't experience the negatives, it's a huge thing. To say, like, to come to a group and think and say, well, I didn't get called a slut or an N-word or whatever today, and that be an accomplishment, and other people know it and can relate. In that way, I feel like these groups will continue to exist.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's agreeing with me. He has his own
You
words.
guys can't see him as much as I can, but Baby Kinks 1.0 is cracking me up. And I know we're talking serious stuff here, and I'm trying so hard not to giggle at him. I'm sorry. He's so cute. He's so cute.
Okay. Are you gonna be shy? Okay. He's a shy baby. But I feel like they'll always exist. But having people understand why they exist, and not be like, well, you're segregating yourself more, blah 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 blah.
Oh,
that kind of stuff. I would love to see that lesson.
Yeah.
To the point of there's a societal empathy. But I think we'll need and require these kind of groups for quite some.
So kind of going back to the whole where's the boys streamers group rolls out. Yeah, exactly, because well, the whole industry is the boys playground. So there you go. But going back to games, I think it would be nice to see more games actually accept that this is a thing and implement ways for those marginalized people to be able to say, you know, hey, this is happening. Like the reporting feature, we touched on that earlier, you know, we shouldn't have to put our chat on subscriber only because we're constantly being stalked by someone, and yet Twitch refuses to permaban that person.
Yes.
One streamer that both of us follow and both of us have met, and she's a really cool person, is Cypher of Tyr, and her job is literally to help diversify the industry, and like she is consistently helping Twitch out, and yet Twitch will not permaban her stalker, and her entire community has talked about it, has tweeted that, like, there's no safe space in games. So there's no safe space in Twitch. There's no safe space in like any of these streaming communities. Like the actual streaming platform itself, there's no safe space. So that's why we have to create our own safe space, because the industry is not helping us. So we have to help ourselves and push them to start helping.
But they're so far behind. Like they tried to have like a diversity thing for TwitchCon. They did not do well with that.
I mean,
and I met the new lady for diversity, but she was only like 2 weeks into the job by the time TwitchCon came around.
Right.
So there was still so much she had to do, right? But I agree with Shambot. The report feature is only
hold up a second. Stream has disconnected.
Yep.
I don't know why it disconnected. It should be back up, hopefully. Okay, all right. It is back up.
Okay. Well, I have a mouthful of food now.
So, but on the TwitchCon thing, yeah. So the diversity area that they had for TwitchCon was tucked away in a corner. Like,
way back far.
You're behind the gaming arcade section.
Yes.
It didn't even look like there was anything back there.
When they advertised, they were so proud that they were gonna have like a Unity lounge, blah blah blah. I was so psyched to be able to get to go, and then it's just tucked back, hidden in a corner. Like I was very confused and off put by that whole situation. But to go back to Shabbat, the report feature is only as strong as the moderation team, but I find whether it's a AAA game that does have money or an indie game, at least indie games, you are more likely to be able to reach out to the actual developers and tell them that this is happening.
Yeah.
Once you get to Siege, Gears, Halo, that kind of stuff, there's
CSGO.
Nobody listening. There's nobody listening. And they're not putting money into moderation. And they're not taking action unless their game is getting hacked.
Right.
And that is a humongous problem. Like I play Siege on the regular. And I cannot tell you, like I've encountered the N-word several times in my life, but the variance of the N-word currently floating around as just names is mind-boggling that they are not catching these.
Oh,
you know what I'm saying?
yeah. Like when it's N3GER. Like, come on, we know what you're doing.
Right?
What the
Or
hell?
or anti-Semitic names,
Yep.
or a lot of those. I'm like, and I've gamed many years, not ran into that much anti-Semitism in my life, I gotta say. And they also have like pictures of Hitler with it too. Like, they're not hiding it. And still nothing is done.
And
So I'm just
there the thing is the problem with the gaming industry is they're creating these games and we're specifically talking about online games, right? Especially the FPS community. Like, those are the toxic ones, right? Overwatch, CS:GO, Siege, those are like the top 3 toxic right now. These online multiplayer games, you're creating these games where people are involved. You have your player base is involved with playing with many other people, but you're not putting money into properly moderating those people. And unfortunately, you can't live in a world where, oh, it all sort itself out when it comes to bringing people together like that. You have to go into these games. You have to go into the development stages with a proper way to actually manage this, and you need to put your fucking money into moderation and pay people to do that job. You have to, or else you're going to fall apart and you're gonna turn into shit like EA and Activision right now. Because Activision Blizzard just destroyed its moderation team. Just destroyed its community management team. Completely, I don't know what the hell they're doing over there, but they just completely destroyed it. So now they don't have anybody actually monitoring these people who are trash and who are yelling these slurs, who are actually, taking time out of their day to stalk people, to take care of people. And this is an issue with Twitch as well. Mixer, not so much, because Mixer is still fairly new, but
it's pretty small still.
yeah, it's still pretty small compared to Twitch. But YouTube is just as bad. YouTube, Twitch, Mixer, Facebook Gaming, they all need to step up their moderation game. And they actually need to do a better job at doing this. And they need to put that money into that. Yes, that's going to cost a lot of money, but you make the money to be able to afford it. There's no excuse. If you're going to create something that's going to involve a bunch of people, you need to pay people to manage those people. Period. We shouldn't have to have communities to be able to manage these kind of game things. Like, we shouldn't have to have girl streamers just so that we can take a break from being called bitches and sluts and being told to get back in the kitchen. But they do, because the companies don't want to invest in us. The companies are not actually investing in their consumers.
Wholeheartedly agree, Shanba.
Yeah, exactly. When consequences do not happen to the offenders, it empowers other offenders to take it to the next level. People love to push the limits. Exactly. And I mean, America is a prime example of that whole notion right now. Anyway, I think we've actually hit our 2-hour mark. We're
Probably.
roughly at 2 hours. So I think this is actually a good place to wrap it up. It's been a lovely discussion. I feel like we could actually keep going with this discussion. You guys have been great in asking us questions and being a part of this conversation. Is there any words of wisdom that you'd like to impart upon people?
You know, just be open to experiencing new things and listening to other people's experiences. Or don't be douchey. At the very least.
Don't be a douchebag. That's the title of our podcast. There you go. Don't be a douchebag. And again, if you guys are actually looking for other communities that are more geared towards what you're looking for to your group, whether it be female-only streams, whether it be person of color, whether it be coders, whether it be LGBT or disabled or anything like that, we would love to point you in that direction. We've got, you know, I know a few. I know Kinky knows a few. So, you know, Girl Streamers is not the only marginalized community out there, and we don't want to be the only marginalized community out there. There's so many really, really good ones, but please
that have been doing things longer than we have.
Yep.
And you know, different experiences for everybody. And
exactly. We may not be the right one for you, but we can at least help you find the right one for you. And don't hesitate ever to ask a question like that, especially when you really want to know. And please be vigilant, because there are communities that tout that they do certain things, but in reality they don't walk the talk, essentially. So please do your research when you are looking into communities like this. Make sure that they are something that you want to be a part of. And sometimes you won't find that out until you get in there and get invested in it a little bit.
But a lot of times there is Twitter discussions, articles. There's something that will tell you how far this group has gone or what it's done. And if not, it's okay to ask.
Yeah.
Don't ever be afraid to ask questions. So
constant vigilance.
Yes.
Well, Kinky, I am so glad we got a chance to do this. We actually talk about this kind of stuff on our own personal streams all the time. Yes. So it was really nice to bring it to Girl Streamers. So you guys, thank you so much. You can always find us on our own personal channels. Kinkednitemare, spelled like it sounds, and I'm at Nymphadora1. Thank you so much for joining me on this this podcast. I had a great time having a conversation with you, as always. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Girl Streamers is partnered with Loot Crate, Simple Jerky, UN Racing Chairs, Glom Tom, Sennheiser, and Humble Bundle. And links to all these amazing partners are down below, so please feel free to click. Thank you guys for all of your support, and please follow us at Girl Streamers on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Instagram. And if you have any questions or would like more information, you can visit our website at girlstreamers.com and contact us through there. You can also subscribe to us on Twitch. And don't forget, you do actually get access to our Discord channel where you can talk to all these amazing people. And you can buy some super cool gear in our online shop at designedbyhumans.com/shop/girlstreamers. And in 2 weeks, our next podcast will be March 3rd with Bruce Wayne Brady. Yeah, that's right. Our second male guest on Girl Streamers will be March 3rd, same time, right here. This podcast is a part of the Two Lazy Dogs media group and the Girl Streamers community. Encourage, support, grow.